Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story about a guy from the IT department. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Don't order any upgraded equipment. To preface, I work in IT and am responsible for ordering all technology-related equipment. About a year ago, I was in charge of getting required specs for computer needs and putting in an order for about 500 PCs, monitors, keyboards, mice, etc. for a new office building that was opening that my company manages. Being that I had already done this same quote for multiple buildings, I knew exactly what was needed. The standard PC build from our supplier comes with 4 GB memory. To run specific software, I have to include at minimum 8 GB, otherwise the computer all but stops working. When making the build through our vendor, the additional 4 GB of memory only runs an extra $26. I put the quote together and send it off to our budgeting department for final approval and ordering. Within the hour, I received the following emails from the head of budgeting, aka Jackwad. Jackwad, I see you included an extra charge of $26 times 500 for computer memory. Me, yeah, we needed to run X software. Jackwad, will it run without the extra memory? Me, not well. Jackwad, we're already over budget. Don't order any upgraded equipment, just get the basic stuff. After trying to explain why it was important several times and how the software would barely work at 4 gigs. Me, not in the mood to deal with this crap anymore. Sure thing. So I revised the order without the memory and sent it back to him. A few weeks later, the computers get delivered and are set up in the new offices. I get them all imaged with the software over the weekend and ready to go. First thing Monday morning, I come into a frantic slew of emails about how the specialized software won't run and nobody can do their job. After a few back and forth emails with the COO, I send the full email chain with Jackwad explaining what happened. I'm told to immediately put in an order for the extra memory, have it delivered as soon as possible, and get it installed immediately. By ordering the memory separately instead of installed initially at $26 per, we had to pay an extra $50,000, $128 per memory stick. Not only that, but I got a ton of overtime and the company lost on a week's worth of productivity. All in all, the company probably lost close to $200,000. Jackwad didn't get fired, but he now has his own policy of ordering what the IT guy suggests. No questions asked. And our next story. Taking on my bullying boss. So last year, I'd been working for a big UK telco as a senior technical reporter for 16 years. All was well, I was highly qualified, my job dealt with local government, so I had clearance, etc. I enjoyed it and my company had supported me when I had to take 3 months off 2 years ago with a serious health condition. But then I got a new boss. We'll call her Helen. Helen was actually part of our wider team, a fellow reporter who was promoted. Actually, she was best friends with the senior manager, so the power went straight to her head, and she started reprimanding people for random things like disrespect for questioning a process change, which would double the time it took to do it, etc. She wanted to make her stamp on the job despite it all working fine until then. Unable to deal with Helen, my colleague Jim hands his notice in. Jim is a technical architect, a role I did some years ago before taking a sideways move into reporting. His customer is huge, and it takes him forever to do his job, especially with all of Helen's improvements. Before he leaves, I get called into an informal chat, which turns out to Helen informing me that they're not backfilling Jim, they're making a cost saving for which she will get a bonus. Instead, my role will be, ta-da, a technical reporting architect for both customers. But that's 2 jobs, I point out. Which part of each are you proposing I drop to even make this remotely possible? We're not dropping anything. It's perfectly doable. But despite whether you think it is, I don't agree. I see Jim struggle every day. It's why he's leaving. I don't want to do 2 jobs. I have my health to think about. Oh, please, you're not so special. She's literally scoffing at me now. I must point out here that my serious health condition was PTSD and a nervous breakdown after having a baby, watching my dad have a stroke, and my mom's heart attack. She then goes on to say she doesn't believe in mental health and I should prepare to have my handover from Jim So I ask her to check with HR whether what she's doing is legal, as it's a change of role with no new contract. This really makes her mad. The meeting ends. A week later, she hauls me into a stress review meeting, which, when I arrived, was a reprimand. In order to try and be as maliciously compliant as she could, she'd written down all 11 things I'm supposed to have done wrong. The idea being I'd end up being written up and, should I betray her again, fired. Some of my crimes were being miserable. Yes, I got in trouble for being sad. Refusing to take on Jim's role and being awkward due to my so-called health problems. She faked a customer complaint. Turns out I wasn't the only one she did this to. Not attending a meeting she ran weekly. I went back through my mail to find the email she'd sent me saying my attendance wasn't required as I used a different system due to my customer. She said I was skating on thin ice if I wasn't willing to pick up the extra work, then why come back at all after Christmas? This was late December. Okay then. Day after New Year's Day, I called in sick. She was right. I had no intention whatsoever of doing 2 jobs. I had 16 lovely weeks off with my family at full pay while I prepared all my evidence. Easy enough, as she was stupid enough to email it to me to take the company to court for bullying. Her manager/best friend would not reprimand her. It never got to court. The entire department was made redundant due to mismanagement, and on top of my redundancy package, I was paid for the remainder of the year plus all my holidays. I got a better paying job the day after I handed my laptop in. My new boss is absolutely lovely, and my new company treats me with respect. And I can see boats and ducks from my office window. She did not lose her job. Her friend promoted her to another department where she is universally hated and back to her old tricks, even going so far as to ring ex-employees' new managers to tell them they made a mistake hiring them, literally just to be a mean bee. But hey, karma will get her in the end. And our third story. 3 hours pay for 0 minutes work? Yes, please. Paul, our hero. Why Paul? That's his name. Dave, Paul's sidekick. Supervisor, Paul and Dave's direct supervisor, team lead. Manager, supervisor's manager, ops manager. Paul worked for a Canadian branch of an Indian-based call center company on the tech support contract for an American-based electronics company based in Cupertino, California. Got that? Phew. This particular call center at the time had an issue with fulfilling the agents available criteria of their contract and was offering lots of overtime. Offering as in, hey, it's your day off, how much overtime can I put you down for? That's not so bad, I hear you say. True, if no was an acceptable answer and if overtime actually involved additional pay or additional time off or any sort of compensation. But that's illegal, I hear you cry. I do believe you are correct, but I am not a lawyer. From Paul's information, the company was playing fast and loose with banked overtime, storing it up for future days off, but would then never approve the time off requests until agents simply quit or were fired. On to our story. Our hero was relaxing over breakfast one morning on his day off when the phone rang. Work. Sigh. But wait, light bulb. Paul. Hello? Supervisor. Paul, we need you for overtime. What time can you come in? Paul. Supervisor. I've got you set up for 30 minutes from now. Paul. Oh, okay, sure. Supervisor. Okay, see you soon. One call to Dave later. Paul. Dave-o, we're going to Punk Supervisor. Dave. Dude. Paul. Dude. Dave. Dude. Paul. Supervisor is going to call for overtime. Trust me, just accept it and say as little as possible. We're going to pretend we're drunk. Dave. Pretend drunk. Got it. See ya. A little while later. Paul and Dave sneak into work and log to the phones to start work. Now let me paint a picture for you. They are apparently wearing the same clothes as the previous day, but now wrinkled. Unshaven, they smell like they've been bathing in beer and gargling with whiskey. And when I say sneak, I mean that their progress would not have been out of character for Bugs Bunny at his most outrageous. Within minutes of taking a seat, manager comes scurrying over, possibly alerted by the aroma surrounding our intrepid heroes. Manager, why are you here? Paul and Dave, in unison, we're doing overtime. Happy smiles. Manager, but you can't work drunk. How can you already be drunk? It's not even 9 a.m. Paul, We're not already drunk. We're still drunk. Happier smiles. Manager, who authorized this? Paul and Dave, in unison, Supervisor. Helpful pointing. Manager, fine, I'll deal with this. You guys go home. Paul, suddenly laser focused, but you're gonna pay us our 3 hours, right? Manager, but. Defeated, yes. Note for non-Canadians, Canadian or at least Ontario labor law has a 3-hour minimum shift length to protect part-time workers from getting copulated by their employers. So our valiant heroes galloped off into the sunset, secure in the knowledge that they had made the world a better place. Actually, they wandered off home and were never, ever called for overtime again. And yes, they did get their 3-hour standard pay. And our last story. Run an unsafe work environment, then refuse to pay for the last week I worked? How about double that instead? I worked at a cafe for about 5 months. In this time, I saw blatant disregard for basic food and workplace safety. Regardless of how many times I brought it up, I was always told that I didn't know what I was talking about because leaving dairy and egg products out in a 30-degree kitchen for 4+ hours is completely safe to keep and reuse, right? There were a bunch of workplace health and safety violations that were, and I quote, too expensive to fix, things that could severely injure or kill someone, but being in a financial sticky spot, I stayed. It all came to a head when they left equipment in such a state of disrepair that one of them caught fire. I spent the next 2 days reporting them to every agency responsible for food and workplace safety enforcement. In the midst of this, I quit without notice due to concerns for my safety. The day I quit was also the day the pay was supposed to be processed, but given their attitude towards paying staff on time, they didn't process mine until after I sent them notice I quit. A week goes by without pay going into my account, and I confronted them. They stated that they're allowed to withhold my pay because of lack of notice, which, yeah, they can. Then they made a mistake. They told me to call the Fair Work Ombudsman to clarify. You bet your butt I did. I also found out they have to pay out my annual leave regardless of how the employment is terminated, which amounts to double what I initially was asking about. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.